Welcome to the sealed pages.
It is genuinely good to be back in the room.
Yeah, it is. And if you are joining us for the first time, you should probably know the ethos here. This isn't about the headlines.
Definitely not.
No. It isn't about the noise of the public square or the urgency of the news cycle. We are stepping into a quiet room, closing the door, and lighting a lamp over a text that demands a very different kind of attention. We are here for the slow read.
Which is becoming a pretty rare luxury, isn't it? To just sit with an idea until it stops feeling foreign and, starts feeling like a mirror.
Precisely. Today, we are opening a session that feels, well, it feels like a confrontation, but the gentle kind. The kind of confrontation you have with yourself when you wake up at 3 in the morning and the house is totally silent and you suddenly can't remember who you're supposed to be pretending to be.
That is a haunting image to start with, but it fits perfectly. Because this text, it doesn't let you sit comfortably. It asks you why you're sitting there in the first place and who you actually are when you stand up.
Right. So we are diving into reverse conformity, and the subtitle here is Staying Different in an Age of Sameness.
Yes.
The author is Feroz Anka. Now, for those who have been walking this path with us for a while, you'll know this is a pretty significant moment. This is our 8th exploration of Anka's work.
It's been quite a lineage. I mean, I was actually looking back at my notes on the previous sessions before we started recording just to trace the arc of his mind. It's fascinating to see where he started and where he has arrived with this one.
Let's ground the listener in that history for just a moment, because I really think you can't fully grasp the architectural weight of reverse conformity without understanding the foundation it sits on.
I agree completely.
We started way back with Lines of the Void.
Right, the physics phase, that was a journey asking if we inhabit reality or just our own constructed maps of it.
Very structural. And then Paths to Myself.
Which felt like a very necessary guide moving from the noise of crowds towards solitude and inner harmony.
Yeah, and then came What Remains Within, which was a huge shift.
It was. Beautiful prose poems on unsaid words, grief, and finding faith in ruins. That's where the emotional landscape really opened up.
Then we had The Geography of Truth.
A contemplative atlas where physical places became mirrors of the human heart.
And What Remains of Humanity in Modern Times.
That was a tough one, a really profound reflection on spiritual erosion and the collapse of meaning.
Definitely. Followed by Before Sentences.
A deep descent into pre-linguistic consciousness and pure silence.
And most recently, Voice Memos to Myself.
Right, tracing that agonizing tension between speed and direction over the course of a single day.
And now we arrive here. Reverse conformity. For me, it feels like he's taken all those threads, the structural analysis of reality, the emotional depth of grief, the appreciation for silence, and just woven them into a single highly focused philosophical and ethical essay. It reads almost like an existential narrative of conscience, a text of inner resistance.
It really does feel like a culmination. Knowing Anka's background, this unique mix of the highly structured world of IT and physics, balanced against this vast, unstructured world of poetry and philosophy, you can feel that tension in this book more than any other.
Yeah.
He writes from the quiet rhythm of the Swiss mountains, and there is a crispness to the thinking, like cold mountain air, but an emotional depth that feels like the valley far below.
Before we open the text itself, I want to spend a moment on the physical object. You've been holding the book, running your hand over the cover. As someone who focuses so much on the sensory and emotional entry points, what are you seeing there? What does it make you feel?
Well, it's moody. It sets the emotional temperature right away. The background is this deeply textured gradient. It goes from a dark forest green into a sort of burnt orange. And it's not glossy. It's very grainy, almost cinematic. It feels tense but reflective. But the central image is what really arrests you. It's this large infinity symbol placed right in the center, slightly tilted, and it's glowing just a bit.
And inside that loop,
Yes, the figures. Inside the infinity loop, there are multiple human silhouettes walking along the path of the symbol. They are all dark, completely faceless, and identical in shape.
just locked in that cycle.
Exactly. It's a visual representation of the cycle of conformity. It's visceral. You look at it and you can almost feel the endless repetition.
Conceptually, that visual strikes right at the heart of the book's premise. That closed loop represents the circuit of sameness. It's a system where movement is constantly happening, but progress does not exist. You're just walking the loop.
And that brings us to the core question Feroz Anka is asking here. It's a question that haunts the entire text, and I want to put it right in the center of the room for us. If even being different resembles one another while the crowd remains silent, where will you stand?
That's the shivering point.
It is.
And I want to clarify the mission of our deep dive today. We are going to walk through this book not as a critique of society in some broad political sense.
Right.
We aren't here to bash the system. The goal is to experience this text as a gradual awakening inside that crowd on the cover, to trace the psychological and ethical journey from unconscious resemblance to conscious differentiation.
So let's begin where Anka begins. The introduction to the age of sameness. He starts with a diagnosis that I found really compelling and frankly quite unsettling.
Yeah, he argues that the age of sameness isn't enforced by oppression.
Right.
It's not forced upon us by a dictator. It's enforced by comfort. The problem, conceptually, isn't that everyone looks alike. It's that everyone feels alike.
That's the terrifying part. If it were visible oppression, we would rebel. We know how to fight that, but we don't know how to fight comfort. He introduces this concept of the land of standard souls.
Let's unpack that, the land of standard souls, because on the surface it sounds almost whimsical, but structurally it's a critique of emotional calibration.
A standard soul is a soul that has been sanded down to the average. In this land, he says, joy has a quota, anger has a filter, and sorrow must be universally acceptable.
Think about the architecture of modern social interactions. There is a rigidly acceptable range of emotion. You could be happy, but you can't be ecstatic to the point of disruption.
Yeah.
You can be frustrated, but not enraged. It's an emotional flattening where tears are only permitted for pre-approved topics.
Exactly. If you cry because a movie is sad, that's socially acceptable. But if you cry over the sudden realization of spiritual emptiness on a random Tuesday afternoon, suddenly you're unstable, you're too dramatic.
We end up policing ourselves to maintain that standard, which leads directly to what he calls the mass production of identity. We talk so much about discovering our identity today as if we are explorers finding something hidden. But Anka argues we aren't discovering it, we're manufacturing it.
He uses the image of the invisible barcode.
Yes. How did that imagery land with you?
Well, think about how we define ourselves now. We absolutely love categories. I'm an introvert, I'm an extrovert, here are my strengths, here are my weaknesses. We eagerly check off these boxes to fit a pre-prepared model.
It's the illusion of choice.
Exactly. We think we are becoming ourselves, but we're really just filling a shelf reserved for a specific demographic. It's a product barcode.
And what enforces this isn't shouting. It's what he terms the tyranny of normality.
Yeah, the invisible violence of conformity.
That phrase is brilliant because violence usually implies a physical strike.
Right.
But this violence leaves no bruises.
It's a whisper. It's the constant background noise saying, don't exaggerate, be reasonable. If you don't do this, you'll be left out. And for human beings, the threat of being left out triggers deep, primal anxiety.
Which creates a profound paradox. He writes, even being different now resembles one another.
It's devastatingly true.
The realization that difference is just turned into another costume. It's a brand. You can buy the rebel package.
But if the crowd is applauding your rebellion, are you truly rebelling? Or are you just performing the designated role of the rebel for a specific audience? That's where the realization hits you.
Let's move into the first official chapter, the anatomy of conformity. Here, Anka takes the machine apart. He introduces the social mold.
The invisible factory, and what's fascinating is how he describes its mechanism. It doesn't destroy your character outright, it just reduces it. It trims it to fit.
And it uses innocent, highly regarded concepts to do the trimming.
Right. Words like discipline, manners, respectability.
He calls this the reasonable human measure. Society uses these virtues to shave off the edges of the soul.
Because no one wants to be unreasonable. It's a brilliant trap. When you are told to be respectable, you are often just being told to suppress your messy, vibrant humanity and conform to the average.
This connects seamlessly to the industry of being different, where society literally says, buy your difference from us.
The commodification of dissent. He talks about trend souls here.
Trend souls.
It's the idea that even our deepest emotions have seasons and fashions. One year it's fashionable to be melancholic, the next everyone is trauma-aware, then we all pivot to being stoic.
It's the exhaustion of trying to update your soul's firmware just to match the current cultural trend.
Exactly. It completely hollows out the actual experience of emotion.
Which leads to the marketing of character and the dictatorship of image. This is a massive structural shift in modernity. Character is no longer viewed as a moral spine. It's a transaction volume.
It's a CV highlight. The shift from being a certain way to merely appearing that way.
The optical quality of the deed becomes more important than the virtue of the deed itself. Doing good works because they look good on a timeline.
And the fear shifts. You aren't afraid of being fundamentally misunderstood. You're terrified of losing the design of yourself that you've carefully curated in others' minds.
The result of living under this dictatorship is what Anka calls the narcotic effect.
Yes. Comfort in sameness. It operates like a sedative.
It silences the internal alarm.
There is a terrifying comfort in looking around and telling yourself, well, everyone lives like this anyway. It absolves you of the responsibility to be an individual.
He concludes this section with a haunting phrase. Becoming the same is a peaceful form of death.
It's not a scream. It's a slow extinguishing of your inner light. You just fade into the collective average.
But the book doesn't allow you to just peacefully fade. Chapter 2 pulls us into the cost of dissent. We transition from diagnosing the disease of conformity to examining the prognosis of the cure. And Anka is very clear. The cure is going to hurt.
It hurts deeply. He begins with the first shock of loneliness, when the crowd disperses.
Walk us through that shock. What does it feel like for the reader?
It's the sudden loss of the we excuse. When you finally step out of the loop, the crowd keeps walking, and suddenly you are entirely alone. You can no longer say, everyone does it.
You're left with your own naked decision.
It's pure nakedness. There is no one to hide behind. The silence isn't peaceful, it's terrifying.
And when you do speak up from that lonely place, it's not heroic in the Hollywood sense. He introduces the trembling voice of no.
I appreciated this so much. True objection often comes with fear, not swagger.
Right.
When you disagree with your family or your colleagues, your voice shakes, your hands might sweat. The fear isn't just that you might be wrong, it's the much deeper fear of being right, but being right entirely alone.
Which triggers the primal fear of exclusion. The self waiting at the door.
The anxiety of not being let back in. We soften our sentences and trim our own edges just to make sure that door stays open for us. We are desperate for the warmth of the room.
But Anka challenges the listener here. Can you sustain applauseless truths?
That is the ultimate test of internal alignment. We are so conditioned to seek external validation. Can you hold on to a truth when no one is rewarding you for it, when the crowd gives you absolutely zero applause?
It requires a massive shift from an external scale to an internal one. You have to become the guarantor of your own reality. And that often requires speaking what he calls irreversible sentences.
The sentence that changes a life once spoken.
Words that burn bridges.
Because the realization is that once you speak the truth out loud, you can't stuff it back in. You can't go back to the comfortable lie. You've altered the architecture of your life permanently. But society pushes back with the shame of harshness. We're pressured to be gentle, which often just forces us to dilute the truth until it's meaningless. The struggle is appearing too much or too rigid in a world that worships flexibility and compromise.
Yes, the truth is often inherently rigid. Gravity is rigid. But we are shamed for holding rigid boundaries around our conscience.
This brings us to a critical pivot point in the text, Chapter 3, the rebellion of the self. The inward turn.
This is where it gets incredibly uncomfortable, because the rebellion isn't against the government or your boss, it's against your own complicity.
The first truth spoken to the mirror, admitting I was not innocent.
It's stopping the habit of blaming the system for your personal silence. You have to look in the mirror and say, I participated in this. I walked the loop.
He analyzes the internal mechanism of this complicity through the excuse factory.
Oh, we all have one running 24/7. It's the internal workshop that constantly manufactures justifications. I'm only human. I need to pay rent. Now isn't the right time. The psychological cost of constantly acquitting yourself is devastating, though. It relieves the immediate guilt, sure, but it completely erodes your internal power.
Eventually, if you are paying attention, you trigger the alarm of conscience. And Anka points out that this alarm cannot be permanently silenced, it can only be lowered. And when it comes back, it returns at a higher frequency.
Many people try to cover up that internal blaring and call it hypocritical peace.
Yes. You mask your inner conflict and pretend it's serenity. You tell yourself you're just avoiding drama, but really you are avoiding your own conscience.
To dismantle that, you have to enter the inner court. You have to become your own prosecutor.
This is a terrifying freedom. We love being the judge of other people, but the shift here is turning that intense scrutiny inward, being your own judge, your own jury, and the accused.
And the goal of this trial is to discover your unsold sentence.
The unsold sentence. This is one of the most powerful concepts in the book. It's the specific set of values that you absolutely refuse to trade for comfort or approval. If you don't have an unsold sentence, you are entirely for sale.
That sets up the architecture for Chapter 4, the weight of truth. Because holding on to that unsold sentence is heavy.
It is. He talks about those who refuse comfort. He makes a stark distinction between a peaceful life and a truthful life.
Comfort is the enemy of growth here because it inherently encourages numbness.
Right. To carry the truth, you have to accept the friction.
He discusses invisible integrity when no one is watching.
The true test of your character isn't the grand public stand. It's the decision you make in the dark when there is no audience to applaud you and no one to condemn you.
And sometimes that integrity manifests as the nobility of silence.
I found this deeply resonant. Not every battle requires a loud public declaration. Sometimes the most powerful objection is simply withdrawing your consent quietly, refusing to nod along, refusing to laugh at the joke.
There's also the concept of stern love, speaking truth without wounding it.
It's a delicate balance. Truth doesn't have to be cruel to be true. But it shouldn't be diluted either. It requires a clarity coupled with deep compassion.
But holding that line is exhausting. Anka acknowledges the fatigue of justice.
Defending the right thing against a constant tide of sameness is profoundly tiring.
So how do you survive that fatigue? He talks about not bending without breaking.
It's the art of resilience. You have to be flexible enough to survive the wind. You can't be completely rigid, but you must be rooted deeply enough that you don't change your location.
Through that endurance, you begin the construction of inner freedom. Built brick by brick through small, consistent acts of honesty, it results in an independent conscience.
Which prepares us for Chapter 5, from identity to nakedness. This is the deepest part of the dive. We're moving entirely beyond social roles now.
A morning without labels. Can you imagine waking up and being just you?
It strips away all the armor.
No profession, no generational marker, no sect, no political ideology.
It's a terrifying vulnerability. We rely on those labels to tell us who we are and where we belong. Without them, you are forced to encounter your actual essence.
In that state, you experience defenseless faith, unmasked prayer.
Faith that doesn't need a congregation to validate it. Worship that doesn't require an audience. It's the profound intimacy of a prayer that absolutely no one sees.
Because, as he notes, the crowd produces security, but not depth.
The crowd gives you a warm feeling of belonging, but it doesn't give you spiritual roots. For that, you have to return to the child within me.
Reconnecting with the unconditional self that existed long before we learned how to perform for love and approval.
It asks the ultimate reductive question. What remains of the I? When the story ends, when all the labels are stripped away, who is actually left standing there?
It's the encounter with the solitary truth, the unidentified right.
Truth exists before there are sides to take. It is incredibly heavy because it doesn't promise you a team. It just demands your allegiance.
Faith without crowd. The sheer ability to believe in something even when the plural support completely evaporates.
That is the threshold of truly being alive.
Which brings us to Chapter 6, the final major section, remaining alive. And we should clarify, defining aliveness here isn't just a biological metric.
No, not at all. It is refusing a peaceful death.
It's the refusal to settle into the average life. A life where nothing hurts simply because nothing is real.
To remain alive requires sleepless conscience. A mind that stays constantly awake to its own ethical responsibilities.
And a resistance to invisibility. Refusing to be seamlessly erased by the crowd. Not necessarily by shouting, but just by staying firm in your reality.
He calls it slow resistance. Silent but enduring.
How does that look in practice?
It's not a sudden flare of anger. It's a root pushing slowly through concrete. It relies on those unsold values. Morality that isn't put up for market circulation.
And it involves burning the image, the sheer liberation of no longer needing to look like anything to anyone else.
That liberation leads to what I felt was the most emotionally resonant part of the text, the inheritance left to a child.
The heaviest inheritance isn't financial.
It's a fearless spine. Children learn the most from what you silenced, not what you preach to them.
The courage not to resemble is framed as a gift to the next generation.
Yes. By refusing to conform, you give them the permission to exist as they are. But it requires perpetual vigilance.
Because it's not over yet.
The temptation to go to sleep, to just conform and be comfortable, returns every single day.
But there is the pulse within the ash. Even if you feel entirely burned out by the friction of standing apart, if there's a single pulse of objection left in you, you're still alive.
So we reach the closure, exiting the age of sameness.
He summarizes the exit strategy perfectly. It is not a door you walk through once. It is a decision you have to make every single morning.
He writes, ash falls silent, The trace speaks. The name withdraws, the direction remains.
The exit is a heavy, irreversible walk that advances through friction.
And he leaves us with the final question, returning to the very spine of the book. What remains of you when resemblance is removed and no one is watching?
It is a profound, warm, insightful appreciation of the struggle to simply remain human.
It really is. This book is a sanctuary for the weary, for the sensitive, for anyone who feels the tightness of the mold and wants to remember how to breathe.
As you take this text with you, our suggestion is to read it slowly. Don't just consume it. Let it act as a compass and simply notice how your inner map begins to shift quietly over time.
That is the beauty of it.
It aligns perfectly with the ethos of the sealed pages, valuing the quiet, deep work over the loud and the temporary. We wish you unsold sentences and true inner aliveness.
Thank you for joining us in the quiet.
Till next time.